Welcome back to the channel. Tensions between Russia and NATO are escalating, and the world is once again watching the fault lines of global power begin to shift. What began as a series of quiet provocations has now evolved into a dangerous new phase of hybrid warfare. This is not a traditional conflict fought on open battlefields with tanks and artillery. It is a shadow war, one fought through cyberattacks, energy manipulation, political interference, and disinformation campaigns designed to weaken the enemy from within and confuse allies before they can respond. In the last few months, NATO and Russian forces have increased activity along the alliance's eastern flank. From the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, both sides claim they are responding to each other's aggression. But behind the official statements, the reality is that this is the most serious standoff since the Cold War. Western analysts are calling it a hybrid war, a conflict that operates in the gray zone below the threshold of open military combat, but above mere diplomacy. Russia has long used hybrid tactics to advance its influence and challenge the West. Cyberattacks on European energy grids, disinformation campaigns targeting elections, and the weaponization of natural gas supplies have become part of its strategy. The goal is simple: to exploit divisions within NATO, to test the alliance's unity, and to expand its sphere of influence without triggering a direct military response. In recent weeks, several European countries have reported new waves of cyber intrusions on government networks and critical infrastructure, many of them traced back to groups with ties to Russian intelligence. At the same time, pro-Kremlin media outlets have amplified narratives blaming NATO for provoking instability while presenting Moscow as the victim of Western aggression. This is information warfare at its most sophisticated, carefully designed to shape global perception and confuse the public. On the other side, NATO has been ramping up its deterrence posture. Military drills across Poland, Estonia, and Lithuania have been scaled up, involving tens of thousands of troops and advanced aircraft from across the alliance. Washington, London, and Berlin insist that these exercises are defensive, meant to send a message of readiness. But the Kremlin views them as provocation, accusing NATO of surrounding Russia and undermining its security. President Vladimir Putin has said repeatedly that Russia will defend its interests by any means necessary. His words are now being matched by action: the deployment of new missile systems, the strengthening of air defenses, and large-scale mobilization drills near the borders of Ukraine and Belarus. Behind this visible tension lies a deeper conflict over influence and control. The hybrid war between Russia and NATO is being fought not only through military movements, but also through finance, energy, and technology. Russia's grip on natural gas has become one of its strongest weapons. Europe remains heavily dependent on Russian energy despite years of diversification efforts. Each time sanctions are discussed, Moscow tightens or redirects gas flows, driving up prices and stirring political pressure within European capitals. This manipulation of energy supplies has created divisions inside NATO. Some members demand a harder stance, while others prioritize economic stability over confrontation. The information front is equally critical. Moscow has perfected the art of digital propaganda, spreading conflicting narratives across multiple platforms to distort the truth and amplify political discord in Western democracies. It is no longer about convincing people that Russia is right. It is about making them doubt whether anyone is telling the truth. NATO intelligence agencies have responded by launching coordinated efforts to expose these operations. But the pace of disinformation spreads faster than governments can counter it. This invisible battlefield is shaping public opinion across Europe and the United States, where social media has become both the weapon and the war zone. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues to sit at the epicenter of this confrontation. Its territory has become the testing ground for hybrid warfare ever since Russia's invasion in 2022. Kiev has endured not only physical destruction, but also relentless cyberattacks and information campaigns aimed at undermining morale and dividing its allies. Despite massive Western aid, Ukraine's future remains uncertain. Its resilience is tested daily by a superpower determined to exhaust it strategically and psychologically. NATO's support for Ukraine has become a defining issue for the alliance, while the Kremlin sees it as the red line that justifies its aggression. The more weapons and intelligence the West provides, the more Moscow doubles down on its threats to retaliate. Diplomatically, efforts to de-escalate remain fragile. There have been back-channel talks between Western officials and Russian counterparts, but the level of trust is almost non-existent. Each side accuses the other of destabilizing Europe and violating international norms. Washington insists that Russia must respect the sovereignty of its neighbors, while Moscow claims NATO expansion is a direct threat to its national security. Both narratives feed into a cycle of fear and suspicion that keeps tensions alive. Every diplomatic breakthrough seems temporary. Every ceasefire or agreement is followed by new provocations and new sanctions. Inside Russia, the Kremlin continues to consolidate power using the external threat narrative to rally domestic support. State media portrays NATO as an aggressive force seeking to weaken and encircle Russia. This narrative fuels nationalism and distracts from internal economic and political pressures. By framing the West as the eternal adversary, Putin has built a powerful tool for maintaining control at home. Western intelligence suggests that this internal propaganda effort is as strategic as any cyber operation. It keeps the Russian population aligned and ready to endure long-term confrontation. For NATO, this hybrid war poses a new kind of challenge. Traditional deterrence was built on clear military thresholds, but hybrid warfare operates in ambiguity. A cyber attack on a power grid or a coordinated misinformation campaign does not trigger Article 5 of the NATO Charter, yet its impact can be devastating, disrupting societies and economies without firing a single shot. NATO's response strategy now includes cyber defense units, information task forces, and rapid reaction teams aimed at countering these unconventional threats. But experts warn that the alliance must adapt faster as technology evolves. In Washington, policymakers are debating how far the United States should go in confronting Russia without escalating into direct conflict. The Biden administration has maintained a strategy of collective defense, diplomacy, and sanctions. But many analysts believe the Kremlin has learned to navigate around these measures by forming new partnerships with China, Iran, and other states outside the Western Bloc. This emerging alignment has created a multipolar challenge where hybrid warfare is no longer limited to Europe, but part of a broader contest over global order. China's growing cyber capabilities and economic power add another layer of complexity to the conflict. Western strategists are now forced to consider that a hybrid war with Russia may intertwine with parallel tensions in the Pacific. As winter approaches, Europe faces new vulnerabilities. Energy security is once again a pressing issue, with Russia reducing exports through key pipelines and using energy as leverage over European governments. Energy shortages and inflation risk undermining public support for NATO's policies. The Kremlin knows that economic pain can divide the alliance and weaken Western resolve. Across Europe, politicians are struggling to balance domestic pressures with the need to stand firm against Russian aggression. Meanwhile, citizens face rising costs of living. Moscow exploits this discontent through covert funding of populist movements and social media campaigns that amplify anti-NATO sentiment. The hybrid war is not confined to the digital or economic domains. It extends into the psychological sphere, shaping fear, uncertainty, and fatigue among populations. The constant stream of alarming headlines cyber alerts, and military movements creates a sense of instability that plays into Russia's hands. The longer this tension lasts, the more difficult it becomes for NATO to sustain unity across 31 member states, from the Mediterranean to the Arctic. Leaders warn that this confrontation may define global security for the next generation. It is not a battle that can be won quickly or decisively. It is a sustained competition for influence, trust, and narrative control. In recent intelligence assessments, NATO has warned that Russia could escalate its hybrid tactics further, targeting undersea communication cables, satellites, and financial networks that underpin global connectivity. These systems are highly vulnerable, and a coordinated attack could disrupt economies worldwide. This possibility has prompted NATO to expand its defense scope beyond land, air, and sea into cyberspace and outer space, acknowledging that the next attack may not come from the battlefield but from invisible lines of code or electronic interference. At the same time, NATO continues to support democratic resilience across Europe, funding media literacy programs and cybersecurity training to help societies recognize and resist manipulation. These efforts reflect a recognition that hybrid war is as much about defending minds as defending borders. But such programs take time to show results, and the Kremlin's operations remain relentless. The pace of technological advancement, from artificial intelligence to quantum computing, means that both sides are constantly evolving their capabilities. This race between adaptation and exposure defines the hybrid era of modern conflict. While the world focuses on Europe, smaller nations caught between Russia and NATO find themselves under increasing pressure. Countries like Georgia, Moldova, and even Serbia are facing complex choices as they navigate economic dependence on Russia and political alignment with the West. Moscow continues to use soft power and covert influence to pull them into its orbit, offering trade deals and security cooperation in exchange for loyalty. NATO, meanwhile, attempts to build resilience through partnerships and military aid, but each of these moves adds another layer to the geopolitical chessboard. Analysts warn that what we are witnessing today is not an isolated confrontation, but part of a longer transformation of warfare in the 21st century. As state and non-state actors use digital tools to destabilize societies, hybrid war becomes the preferred weapon of asymmetric power. It allows nations to project influence without direct confrontation, to achieve strategic goals while maintaining plausible deniability. This makes traditional diplomacy harder and deterrence less effective, because the enemy is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. In the coming months, tensions are expected to rise further as both sides increase readiness and rhetoric. NATO's new defense plans emphasize rapid deployment, while Russia accelerates production of advanced drones and missiles capable of targeting critical infrastructure. Western capitals are reinforcing their intelligence cooperation to monitor threats, while warning that hybrid attacks may precede larger military actions. The risk of miscalculation remains the greatest danger. One cyber attack too far, one intercepted drone, one misunderstood maneuver could spiral into a crisis that neither side intends, but both might be forced to confront. For ordinary citizens across Europe and beyond, the hybrid war is felt not through bombs or sirens, but through inflation, power outages, and the constant uncertainty of digital threats. It is the anxiety of waking up to headlines about new sanctions, new cyber attacks, or new military drills. It is the awareness that the world is once again divided between two visions of power, and that the struggle for control is being waged across every dimension of modern life. As the hybrid conflict deepens, global institutions are under strain. The United Nations calls for restraint, but its influence is limited. The European Union continues to impose sanctions, yet internal divisions weaken its leverage. The United States balances deterrence with diplomacy while preparing for the long haul. No one wants a full-scale war, but no one is willing to back down either. The hybrid war has become a test of endurance, where success is measured not by territorial gains, but by who can outlast and outmaneuver the other in the shadows. In the end, this is more than a geopolitical confrontation. It is a reflection of a changing world order where power no longer rests solely on armies, but on data, energy, and perception. The battle between Russia and NATO is shaping the rules of this new era, defining how far nations can go in weaponizing information and technology without crossing the line into open conflict. The stakes could not be higher because what happens in this hybrid war will determine not just the security of Europe, but the future of global stability. As tensions mount, the message from NATO remains clear: deterrence, defense, and unity. Russia continues to project defiance and strength. Both sides are locked in a dangerous dance of escalation and restraint, where every move is calculated, every word carefully chosen, yet every moment brings the world closer to the edge. This is the reality of modern warfare, fought not just with weapons, but with narratives, algorithms, and power grids, a conflict without front lines, but with consequences that reach into every home and every screen. And as the world watches this unfolding struggle between Moscow and the West, one question remains unanswered: how far can this hybrid war go before it turns into something we can no longer control? That's all for today. Stay tuned for continuing coverage and in-depth analysis as this critical story evolves. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share to stay informed in real time. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next report.